Who is Jason Voorhees? Okay, so when people say Jason Voorhees, most folks instantly picture the hockey mask, the machete, and that slow walk where you blink and he's suddenly behind you. But Jason didn't start as a horror icon. He started as a kid who got failed by every adult in the room. Everything begins at Camp Crystal Lake, a summer camp in New Jersey owned by the Christie family. Jason's mom, Pamela Voorhees, works there as a cook. Jason is born with disabilities, and because kids are cruel and counselors are lazy, he becomes the camp's punching bag. He gets mocked, chased, and ignored. That matters, because Jason's entire legend is basically built on one idea. People didn't protect him when they should have. Then comes the moment that creates the curse of Crystal Lake. In 1957, Jason is at the lake, and the counselors aren't watching. He's surrounded by kids who bully him, panic kicks in, and he ends up going into the water. He drowns. At least, that's what the camp believes. The camp shuts down for a while, and here's the creepy part, his body is never found. And this is where Friday the 13th does its classic, wait, what? Twist over time. Pamela, and everyone else, believes Jason is dead, but the story leans into the idea that Jason survived and spent years wandering the woods near Crystal Lake, growing up wild, basically living in isolation and surviving in an old shack. Imagine that. A kid dies, the world moves on, and he's out there, alone, becoming something else. Meanwhile, Pamela is destroyed by grief. And she doesn't just grieve, she turns it into rage. In 1958, she kills 2 camp counselors, and from there, she keeps sabotaging attempts to reopen the camp. Fires, destruction, anything to make sure Crystal Lake never becomes happy again. It gets so bad that the Christie family basically gets wrecked financially. Crystal Lake becomes a cursed place, but not because of magic, because Pamela refuses to let it heal. Jump to 1980. Steve Christie, the son, tries to reopen the camp again, and that's when Pamela fully snaps into slasher mode. She starts killing to stain the camp again, to ruin it before it can restart. But her spree ends when a counselor, Alice Hardy, kills Pamela in self-defense. And that should be the end, right? Nope, because this is the exact moment the story hands the torch to Jason. Jason finds what's left of his mother, and, depending on the version you follow, he builds a messed up little shrine for her, like he's preserving her anger, and making it his entire reason to exist. From here on, Jason starts copying Pamela's pattern, but even colder. Less emotional speeches, more pure mission. He grabs a machete and becomes the thing people whisper about around campfires. And eventually, he puts on the look that turns him into a pop culture monster, the hockey mask, most famously in Friday the 13th, Part 3. That's when Jason becomes the Jason everybody recognizes. Silent, unstoppable, basically a walking punishment for anyone who dares to step onto his territory. And it doesn't stay limited to Crystal Lake either. Over the years, the movies throw him everywhere, even Manhattan. And later, it gets so wild, it goes beyond Earth. That's the franchise. It starts as camp horror and slowly turns into Jason can show up anywhere, anytime. So, why does Jason kill? The simplest answer is also the real one. Revenge. Revenge for the drowning. Revenge for his mother. The 2009 reboot makes this especially obvious. It strongly suggests adult Jason is driven by the idea that these partying teens are the same kind of careless people who let him die. There's also this darker implication across the movies. Jason might believe he saw or felt the moment Pamela died, and that becomes a permanent trigger. Now, the other big question, what even is Jason? Because he doesn't stay human. Early Jason is basically just a brutal guy, strong, scary, but still human enough. Then the series turns him into something else entirely. One of the biggest turning points happens when Tommy Jarvis becomes paranoid and decides he needs to destroy Jason's body for good. He digs up the corpse during a storm, and then because horror movies love lightning, Jason's body gets struck and he comes back. That's the moment the franchise stops pretending Jason is just a man and starts treating him like a near immortal zombie monster. From that point on, he takes damage that would erase any normal person, and he just keeps going. Which leads to the idea the movies keep pushing. Jason has insane regeneration. In Jason X, it's shown that the US government holds him in cryo specifically to study his healing ability. Think about how nuts that is. Not, we arrested a serial killer, more like, we froze a supernatural murder tank because we don't know what else to do with it. The rules are messy, but the vibe is pretty consistent. Jason can survive almost any punishment as long as his body stays mostly intact. He can get shot, stabbed, burned, smashed, and still come back. There's a moment in Jason Takes Manhattan where he gets hit with toxic waste and goes under, and the story still refuses to let him be done. That's why people call him unstoppable. The franchise keeps showing you, normal physics don't fully apply to him anymore. But when Jason gets completely destroyed, like his body gets blown apart or heavily dismembered, that's when he usually needs some outside push to return. And the movies literally show that happening. In Jason X, nanotech accelerates his healing and turns him into Uber Jason, basically a sci-fi upgrade version of the monster. And then there's the wildest mechanic of all, spirit transfer. In Jason Goes to Hell, the movie introduces the idea that Jason can avoid death by transferring his essence into another person. Like, he wears bodies the way people wear jackets. And it doesn't go smoothly. Whoever he possesses starts deteriorating from the inside, like their body is rotting because it can't contain what he is. Then, to return fully, he needs a blood relative of the Voorhees line, which is why the family connection becomes suddenly important. This is also where the Jason is a demon talk gets louder. The demon angle was pushed a lot by director Adam Marcus for Jason Goes to Hell, and while it's more of a fan-fueled interpretation than hard proof, the movie definitely opens that door with props and lore vibes. So, depending on who you ask, Jason is either a cursed undead slasher with regeneration, or a literal supernatural entity using bodies, or some combination of both. Now, can Jason actually be killed? The most honest answer is yes, but also not really. There's a character named Creighton Duke who says the only real way to end Jason is basically, through a Voorhees he was born, and only by a Voorhees he can die. And in the short term, the movies play with that idea. Jason does get taken down by his niece, Jessica Kimball, using a mystical Voorhees dagger to stab him in the heart. So you'd think, okay, done. But this is Jason Voorhees. The franchise never says goodbye for long, because later, Freddy Krueger literally pulls him back out in Freddy vs. Jason, using the last of his power to drag him from hell. So even hell isn't a permanent lock, which is why the ending always feels the same. There's no guaranteed way to erase him forever. You can stop him in a moment, you can win a battle, but the idea of Jason, the legend, the curse of Crystal Lake, it always finds a loophole. So, if you ever wondered what Jason really is, he's basically a tragedy that grew teeth. A kid nobody protected, a mother who snapped, and a place that never stopped bleeding. And that's the scariest part. Jason doesn't feel like a villain with a plan. He feels like the consequence of everyone's worst mistake. Now, tell me what version of Jason is your real Jason? Human woodsman Jason, zombie tank Jason, or body-hopping curse Jason?